All right. All right. Good Monday. Good Monday. Man, it is Monday. I just feel like the days kind of like blend and bleed together. Like just one big existence. Like it's
Oh
one
my
big
gosh.
Monday. Well, good day. Good day and welcome. Welcome to the Home Education Podcast, the hashtag HEF podcast. If you're not familiar with what HEF is, it is the Home Education Foundation. It is a organization started by the beloved Brenda Dickinson, who is going to be with us today and for quite some time. She's been with us for the last year. We're so thankful. Actually, she's been with us for the last 40 years. And that's why we are able to have such wonderful, wonderful laws and home education in the state of Florida with so many rights and opportunities that she's helped fight to secure. And of course, not alone, but all thanks to a big community of support. The home education community in Florida is robust. And we're very thankful for our top sponsors, especially among that community. We have Arete, FPEA, and Fisher Precious Metals. These are our top sponsors. They come in with big support and help make it all possible. Everything that we do, there's so much that happens behind the scenes that never ever gets seen or talked about, and it's difficult to what's the word? It's difficult to demonstrate the value that has, because some of it has to remain untalked about. And that's unfortunate, but it is still happening, and it's there. We get many calls from parents, whether it's about sports or extracurriculars or their driver's license, and we're home education, and this has happened, and how is this right? We can't access parks. We get calls from all over Florida, with issues that we are constantly advocating for parents for, and that's not necessarily lobbying. So that is one of the reasons why HEF and the board decided to create the nonprofit HEF Connect to help seed some of the advocacy work that we do and to blend it with an existing mission for the expansion of success opportunities and pathways and post K-12. So all of the home education opportunities for success after K-12 are what HEF Connect is focused on, and now that focus and the advocacy can sit together in one 501c3, which makes it a whole lot easier for our sponsors to come on board and help support all of the work that we do. And so many things have grown over the past year, and we just want to give them a shout out. We leave them up on the screen for just a bit at the beginning, but now we're going to move to our faces. So now people can see who's talking and who we are. Brenda, thank you for being with us today. It's always a joy to have you. And Crystal, thank you for taking time to, among your crazy schedule of, we were just in the other room homeschooling the kids and doing various things and chasing the dog through the yard. So thank you for making time to also be with us. If you don't know, Crystal is she's basically our community manager, and she comes and handles a lot of the communication that you see in the forums and on Facebook. She's constantly monitoring Facebook in the different groups to keep up with things that are trending and that are important. And moms want a mom to talk to sometimes, so she's there, and that's great. Brenda, we've been in the weeds on things. Where do you want to start?
A lot of weeds.
I was thinking we could start by talking about the Craig Dickinson Act today, because I think it's a great one. It's something that a lot of people don't know about still. And I remember getting calls during legislative session from parents who were looking at Florida because of the opportunities that their kids would have to play sports, in particular at public schools, and compete. And they really they thought that was fantastic, and they were looking specifically to move their students down here, their kids down here, while they were able to do that high school opportunity. So. And then, of course, it just so happens some of the issues we've been running into lately also kind of fit in that category of conversation. So I can pull it up on the screen if you want, 1006. I don't think you'll be able to see it.
No, I won't.
Yeah.
I think I have it memorized, though.
I think you do. So tell us why it's called the Craig Dickinson Act first.
Well, that's kind of a long story.
All right.
It took 2 years to get this law passed. The first year, they would not allow it to be heard in committee. And there was a lady who was a representative from Alachua County, where the Florida High School Athletic Association is located.
Mm.
And they did not want homeschoolers to participate in athletics. So the
Mm.
FHSAA, the Florida High School Athletic Association, which is called FHSAA,
Right.
had passed a bylaw that said no home education student can participate in athletics at any of our member schools. So we tried to negotiate from 1994, 95, 96. We had well, actually, it was 95. We had the bill, and it was vetoed by the governor.
Okay.
So I take that back. Let me think. Let me think about this. It was it was vetoed by the governor. I had to amend it onto the dual enrollment bill because that was the only way I could get it heard in committee. So I knew it would kill dual enrollment, but it was worth a shot. So it got all the way to the governor's office, and Governor Childs and Ron Davis, who was the uh, commissioner of the FHSAA, were good hunting buddies. And so all it took was a phone call to the governor, please veto this bill. And it was all that work out the window. So Cynthia Chestnut, who was the representative that was the chair of the education committee, who would not allow it to be heard in her committee the first year, was the one that received a call after I had a meeting with the governor's office after the bill was vetoed. And the governor initiated the call. He said, I don't believe, it wasn't the governor himself, it was one of his legislative directors. And he called, he said, the governor doesn't think we need a law. I said, well, it seems it's going to take a law because they won't negotiate. And he said, oh, I think we have ways of negotiating with them. And I said, well, that's great. I'd like to see how that works. He said, would
Yeah.
you be willing to come to a meeting? Absolutely. I said, can I bring some people? Yes, you can. So I knew the specific people to bring. And so we had our meeting. And as we anticipated, we got nowhere.
Okay.
And so after that, which I didn't know until later, after a lot of this had happened, the governor was furious. And so
Oh.
he had his legislative director call who they thought would be the next Speaker of the House. That was
Okay.
the year that the Republicans won majority in 1996. Up until that, for 100 years, the Democrats had controlled the legislature.
Okay.
So he called Buzz, what's his name? Buzz Ritchie from Pensacola, and said, I want this bill put on the agenda. So Cynthia Chestnut, who had blocked it in 95, called me and said, she called me herself, we would really like to put this bill on our agenda for the first committee meeting. And I'm going, what? I didn't know all this other stuff had gone on behind the scenes.
Okay.
So we had our people, and I worked the committee, and we thought we had the votes and blah, blah, blah. And so finally, it's a long story, but finally through the end, the bill was on the floor. And Cynthia Chestnut, Representative Chestnut, called me and she said, I would really like to add an amendment to this bill. And I thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Sure.
No,
Sure.
no.
Yeah.
because usually amendments on bills at the last minute tend
Yeah.
to cause
Yeah,
the
we've
bill
seen
not to
that
pass.
even this year. Yep.
And she said, well, let me just explain to you what I want to do. I go, okay. She said, I'd like to name this after your late husband because of all the work that y'all have done for home education students. Now, she
Oh,
was
wow.
an administrator in the Alachua County School District, and the FHSAA was in her district. But by that time, we had made friends,
Hmm.
and she said, and I need you to write something so we can do this on the floor and make a big presentation. And so then the Senate decided, well, we want to do that too. So they had
Of
another
course.
ceremony
Not to
over
be
in the Senate.
outdone.
Huh?
Not to be outdone by the House.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's how it got to be named the Craig Dickinson House.
Wow. That's fantastic. That is.
And a lot of people call it the Tim Tebow bill.
Oh yeah, I've seen that recently. I thought West Virginia actually is recently started to kind of push the Tim Tebow Act, and I'm like, they don't even know Tim Tebow was allowed to play because of Brenda and Craig Dickinson.
Right.
Yeah, it should be called the Dickinson Expansion Act.
Yeah, that would have been an appropriate name.
Yeah,
So
it's so interesting to me. I mean, I don't want to say a number of things, but first, like I'm very touched listening to you tell that story because I know the time and the timing, and it feels impossible in some ways for certain things to have happened. Yet they did, and it feels miraculous almost. Like why the aisle crossing and these moments of collaboration happening, and you watch people set aside. I mean, they're historically haven't wanted home education students to play. Even now, there's big fear about, well, how do we zone them and what do we do and how do we keep them out? You know, they won't say it. They don't say it. They don't say it. So a lot of them
their
though,
fear is all these homeschoolers have all day to practice. They're going to show up at our schools in
yeah,
masses,
and
and
crowd out opportunities for the public school kids. Yeah,
which has never happened.
right. No, and a
There's
lot of it's just
always
fear
fear of the
talking.
unknown,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and you have so many kids in public school that don't want to play sports or that aren't playing sports.
Right.
So like, just it's a I don't know. And I've heard conversations at the FHSAA meetings about some of the schools that don't have enough students who want to play the sports. So it's interesting to me. I know there's money. I know there's money, and money is driving a lot of it. But it's interesting also that the level of distance, how quickly we get distanced from our roots, right? Like this fight for home education rights in Florida, mid 1980s, and then you've very shortly after that have this expansion for extracurriculars and competitive sports, which is phenomenal. That was so forward thinking and forward reaching at that moment. Now everyone's playing catch up, but it's almost normal now, or at least when you tell people that, oh, we're homeschooling, they're like, oh, okay. Like it's not the same vehemently like ostracized negative, right? Like you're weird. You know, we still think they're weird, and a lot of us are, and that's
The
all right.
next question is, what about socialization? As the kids are talking their heads off to all the people.
Everyone's weird. Yeah,
Yeah,
but everyone's weird.
I think you make a good point because in like our kids' generation, for example,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of parents who just take these rights as a given. They
Yeah.
weren't around before they existed, and so the reality that someone had to fight for them and actually get them
Yeah.
put in place is sort of lost.
Yeah.
It's not really talked about much.
It's
And
similar.
with that, the reality that we have to fight to preserve them as well.
Yeah, it's similar to balancing a checkbook, right? Like I remember being taught by my mom to balance the checkbook. Every time we'd go grocery shopping and you'd spent some money and you wrote a check for the groceries, you immediately wrote down how much you took out and how much was still in there, and you did your own math, you know, and all of that was important. And I don't ever remember going, oh, well, just write a check for that, Mom. You know, like I remember having that conscious awareness of the cost of things. And that was very important. And now Like I hear kids like, oh, well, just use the card. We don't have the money for it. Just use the card. I'm like, it's not magic. It's not like bibbity bobbity boo. Now that's ours, right? Like we're so distanced from the root of the cost, that it makes it hard to see the value of it and preserve it. And I think that's true in a lot of ways of our homeschool rights as well. Like it's becoming so normal and so expected and entitled, if I could say that, that it's almost like we've forgotten how hard it was to get it started, and what the advantages that Florida has because of Brenda are, and what it takes to constantly be vigilant and watch it. And that's not lost on me because I'm like right here next to you doing it. But I am starting to realize the idiot that I was, 2 years ago, not knowing very much about it and just enjoying the freedom. And then coming and working alongside of you for the past year and a half, almost 2 years, in building the website and getting all the information together. And it just opened my eyes to a lot. So I would say if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching, I think diving into the history of information, doing some Google searches, jumping on some of our podcasts and watching some of the old runs of our podcast. This is episode 62, Brenda. We've done 62 of these. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And checking some of that out, finding out, especially some of the ones from session where it's grueling and you get to see some of the difficulty play out. That's important too. Well, do you want to dive in a little?
Let's go back
further?
to the taking it for granted thing.
Mm-hmm.
Back when we were trying to get the law passed, nobody was letting anybody know they were homeschooling their kids. They kept them at home during the day. And there are stories about people who lived in neighborhoods and they would dress their kids up, put them in the van in the morning, drive out of their garage, drive around the block to the school. The kids would get in the floorboard of the vehicle. They would drive back home with an empty vehicle, pull the garage in the shades, and stay there till 3 o'clock and reverse the process so that the neighbors would not report them for truancy. That's the kind of fear that existed among the pioneers in the home education movement.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody wanted to come out and help. They didn't want to be known.
Right. Yeah. I remember being at church, and when we decided to start homeschooling, or I would say I begged my mom and she said yes. Long story, funny story. She eventually said yes. And so everyone at church was like, well, what are y'all doing? Like, what is this? And I remember we had a young preacher in training, like he was mentoring, and he just young guy, just thought it was nuts. And now he lives in Tampa with like 6 kids, and he was like, it's homeschool or nothing. Like, it's the only way. Like, it's now like the golden standard for him. It's just funny to me, like how far that shift, that changes. But I think a huge part of that is a lot to do with the ripple effect of the work that you've done in Florida, and people watch, and it sets a trend. And then, West Virginia, Tim Tebow gets to play sports because of that and becomes an icon. And so now that ripples out to other states. We should have a Tim Tebow Act, and we should do this too. Homeschoolers need this and that. It's like, yeah. It's just funny that one little drop. It takes a brave soul to kind of stand up and speak out, and make those moments real. But so many people benefit from them without ever even knowing what it took for them to happen. So it's not lost on me.
I remember one of those meetings in the governor's office when they were so shocked that they had no authority over the Florida High School Athletic Association. It was originally Activities Association because the bands were under it. And the band masters wanted to allow homeschool bands. There were 2 in the state at that time to go to their convention and have their bands judged by the judges that do that for public schools. I mean, it wasn't like they were winning a football scholarship or a championship or anything. They just wanted to see how they compared, how their students compared to the other students participating. So the bandmaster, I remember, dear old soul, bless his heart, he tried really hard to convince the FHSAA to let them allow bands. No way.
And that's when they got rid of band.
No way. So that was 94. And we did everything we could by way of negotiating, trying to give them, well, we'll do this if you'll do that, blah, blah, blah. And that's when I finally said, well, we got to have a law to change this. And so fast forward the next year, after they vetoed that year, the next year, it did pass in 96. When we were in the governor's office in September, I had invited Ralph Ortega, who used to be a linebacker for the University of Miami. Oh, no. He played professional sports down there, Miami Dolphins. This big guy, I mean, he's huge. Well, they had homeschooled their twin girls up until 9th grade. And because the FHSA wouldn't let them play unless they were in public school, they put their kids in public school for 9th grade. And then they wouldn't let them participate because they wanted a grade from them at the end of the first grading period. And so he was furious. And then we invited the judge and his wife, who was the band masters for the Pensacola band, and one of my board members, who's also was a very big guy, and he was coming because he lived in Gainesville and had negotiated with the FHSAA. And then we had one other family whose son wanted to play golf because they wanted him to be able to go to the University of Florida on the golf team. So those were our people that we had there. And when we were going through this, and Commissioner Davis rears back in his chair, crosses his arm. Yeah, I mean, this was a big show. It was like, and crosses his arms like there is no way that homeschoolers are going to play sports at any of our member schools. And and it was like steam started coming out of the legislative director for the governor. He says, "You don't understand." Well, I thought Ralph Ortega was going to jump across the table. He got up and he reached almost halfway across the table. And I think he was going to choke Ron Davis. So fortunately, my other big board member, Bob Muni, was on one side. And there was somebody else, and they pulled him back down in his chair. It was like amazing to watch.
That's wild. That's wild.
I mean, these people were heated.
Yeah. Oh, they are. They get. I was watching. I was in the recent FHSAA board meeting, and there's a lot of, dare I say, territorial pride or
protecting their territory.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of territorial concern. It's very important to them. So
they don't have the mindset of, whoa, these are Florida students. We're paying for the public schools and our taxes.
Right.
Every family that owns property, or even if they're renting, the property owner pays taxes to support the public schools. And we should have the opportunity to have equal privileges. So that brings us to the next topic. Equal privileges.
Yeah, that is something that we've been working on, getting calls about lately. Do you want to dive in?
Okay, so
on to the issues.
Back when we passed the law in 1996, we stuck this little statute number in the Craid Dickinson Act, which governs home education students. and it was referred to controlled open enrollment, which back in
Yeah.
1996, it allowed the schools to move students around instead of being in their zoned school district. The districts all have zones for public school students. So if you
So I
lived in
have
this,
that up. Sorry. I have up 1006.15C, subsection C, where, or I guess it's 4C, where it says an individual home education student is eligible to participate at the public school to which the student would be assigned according to district school board attendance area policies, or which the student could choose pursuant to 1002.31, which is what you were referencing,
right.
or make an agreement with a private school.
So at that point in time, I didn't know a thing about controlled open enrollment. And the FHSAA had hired a lobbyist who, he was a great guy, and we got along famously. And so he knew he had lost and that they're going to have to negotiate here. So he said, when we were saying where they could participate, he said, oh, they ought to be able to participate under controlled open enrollment. And I said, okay. So we stuck that little statute number in there. Well, most of the school district didn't even know what that was. They didn't have a plan. They just let homeschoolers choose another school. Well, fast forward to the, I guess it was like in the early 2000s when they were trying to make the public schools less restrictive. And so they opened up charter schools. Well, that was a big fight because the school district didn't want any competition with other public schools. And then they took the controlled open enrollment and they expanded that to give students more rights to be able to choose which school they go to. And so the meaning of statute 1002.31 changed when they expanded that statute for controlled open enrollment.
Interesting.
So then in the meantime, and I'm not sure what year it was, but it would have been a constitutional amendment that dictated the class size for class.
Yeah.
Okay. So the class size amendment then was interpreted by the Florida legislature, and they said, well, how are we going to do this? We can't make them open up more classes. The initial thought was 20 students per class. So what they did is they limited the class size amendment demand to core courses. So band, weightlifting, PE, music classes, all those all those kinds of things don't have a class size restriction, only core courses.
Okay.
So it's still chugging along. This is still working for homeschoolers. But as time has moved on, and this happens with statutes,
right? Okay.
This has become very contentious again,
right?
Because homeschoolers shouldn't have more rights than the public school students have. Okay. Therefore, we wouldn't be able to pick a school if their capacity was already met. And that's what 1002.31 says now, is their school choice is based on capacity. Well, obviously, home educated students that want to play athletics or play in the band, they're not taking up a seat in those core courses.
You know what I would love to see? I would love to see a debate. I really would. On why some of these thought processes, because you're going through the layout of it, but I think that there are some The issues with the fundamental premise of, well, homeschoolers shouldn't have any more rights than kids in public school. Like, what does that mean? Slow down and debate that and spell that out. I don't think that, you know, any more rights, but access. We have a whole world of freedom. We don't have four walls into a classroom. There's a lot that we do they don't do. There's a lot we have access to they don't have access to because we're not trapped into a building. But there's a lot of things we don't have that they do because we don't want to be there. So there are circumstantial differences that are inherent in the choices. There's freedoms that are inherent in the choices. So we can't access the freedoms that we have at our disposal because it would be deemed like we have extra rights they don't have. Like, they have the right to home educate too if they want to. Like, where do you then draw the pivot point or the deviation points of as to what that looks like and means? I'd love to see debates on this. Unfortunately, I think legislative committees aren't really going to get granular about it, or give it the time.
They might. You'd be surprised.
I'd love to.
Athletics is one of those
I'd love to
touchy areas.
I'd love to be involved in it. I'd moderate it.
Well,
I'd moderate it.
I think we might have some traction in the Senate if we wanted to change it. I haven't yet figured out, unless we put in something like they could choose according to 1002.31, without restrictions on capacity or something along that line, where we could add a few words in there that would take homeschoolers' choices out of the capacity limitation, because their argument is stupid. Well, you know, the seat, they're arguing that there's no seat in the school. Well, we don't want a seat. We don't want a seat. We're not asking for a seat.
Not a seat.
We're not going to affect the capacity of the school.
For the core, especially for the 4 core math, English, science, the core classes.
Exactly.
Which is what the seat restriction's for.
But what they're really afraid of is that we would bring enough Tim Tebows to one school. That they could build super teams. That's the real fear. It isn't about rights or privileges.
I get that. I do get that fear, and I understand it, because I remember as a kid when we played community sports. We went down, and the community sports where all the kids from the community come down. We have tryouts. All the coaches watch all the kids' tryouts, and then they basically do like a round robin, and they pick and who gets first pick and all that kind of stuff until the pool of kids is kind of, you know, dispersed. But lo and behold, after selection one year in the basketball team, this coach shows up and is like, "Hey, I found a group of kids from a neighborhood far away, and I'm willing to ship them in and get them a ride so that they can play in the community sports." And you're like, "Oh, that's great." The problem is these kids played basketball together every single day with each other all the time, the same kids. And they didn't break them up and put them back into the pool and say, "Hey, play amongst everybody." They stacked the team and demolished. They demolished, absolutely torrentially demolished everyone in that season, and it was literally no fun.
And so, you know, being not a home edge person, but just thinking about it in terms of fairness.
That's the fear.
That it wasn't fair to all the other kids. And so in our position as lobbyists, we have to be able to look at the big picture, understand the concerns of the opposite parties. I do see that. And I do see that it could happen.
I think that without guardrails, a 10-year play out where people have enough time to sell their home and move or get close enough to like go to this school I do see that. I do see that.
Well, it actually does happen in the public schools. They just don't talk about it so much, because Armwood in Tampa.
I'm familiar with Armwood. I actually substitute taught there.
We used to run cross country against them.
I couldn't hear you, Crystal. Speak up.
Oh, we used to run cross country against them because I'm from the Tampa area. Yeah.
And so there was a big to-do, and actually the law got changed so that the people that investigated for the FHSAA, the legislature put a lot of restrictions on what they could do as to how they could investigate these recruiting issues, because the father who wanted his child to play at Armwood had claimed the grandmother's address. And actually, when they went in to investigate, which the grandmother should have never allowed them in the house, but she let them come in and look around, and they found a pair of underwear in the drawer in the room where he was supposed to be living. And it caused a humongous furor about how they broke their way into the house, and they, ransacked the house, and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they didn't.
Wow.
They didn't. It was just blown out of proportion. So,
man.
Anyway, so on the one hand, the FHSAA,
territorial.
by law, they can't. The schools can't recruit, and the FHSAA is supposed to police that so that you don't have recruiting going on among public schools. And then they clipped their wings, so they couldn't. And so it's just, athletics is just one of those issues that people get really, really bent out of shape about.
They get
now, if they had a top-notch math team and they were winning all kinds of competitions, there wouldn't be anybody begging to be on the math team.
I've seen beauty pageant drama go just as hard. Like just as hard. Oh man. It's that competitive arena that draws competitive people to it, and then they get territorial, man. Like you're oof. Ooh. I'm from Alabama, so I remember when Alabama and Auburn played each other and people couldn't go to church together. These are people who love Jesus more than anything, but not on that day. Like that is just
that's terrible.
It's terrible, but this is how, that's how people get, especially when they're super competitive in those areas. But and
some parents who live their life out vicariously through their little 10-year-old or 12-year-old who hates baseball, who hates baseball, but he's there every practice because daddy's pushing him on, and
Joe Montana wouldn't give up.
Some of the worst characteristics in people.
Oh, man.
It's unbelievable.
It was always Paul Bear Bryant growing up in Alabama. Paul Bear Bryant, you gotta push yourself. You're gonna make the team one day. Like, oh man. Oh, as soon as a baby is born, they're buying Alabama Roll Tide and Auburn War Eagle stuff, and like, oh man.
And then he chooses to go to the University.
He's got to choose. Yeah. That's what I did. I wanted to escape it, so I came to Florida. Oh man. All right. Well, bringing it back in, the Craid Dickinson Act, right?
So getting back to how this operates, the Superintendent's Association and their attorney are backing the school district, saying that a home education student cannot attend or choose to attend or participate at a school that is at capacity, because that's what the school choice statute is talking about.
So that's the metric of control they're kind of choosing to hold on to. It doesn't make sense, but it is a mechanism of control that currently exists. So that's kind of,
So it's pretty hard to argue that in that situation, well, homeschoolers should have the opportunity when public school students can't go there because the school has met capacity on those core courses.
Right.
So, is this something that we want to die on our sword over? I mean, that's the question that you and I and our boards have to decide. Right. Is it one or two students in the state that are being denied access there?
Right. Or is it
is it worth the effort to try to do that over a 2-year period?
Right.
I don't know. It's like I want homeschoolers to have equal opportunities, but I've
Certainly.
never argued for extra
Right.
opportunities that other
But
students don't have.
and we get taxed without being able to opt out, right? So if we're paying for it already, why shouldn't we have access to it? I think is one of the other key factors that plays in. But I do think that there's validity. I think it's kind of ridiculous on one end, and then I also think it's valid. And allow me to hold two opposing viewpoints inside my own mind. But I think that the idea that homeschoolers would stack a school and have a super school of homeschooler athletes is kind of far fetched. Like it is, that's wild to me. Crystal directed a home education instructional program down in Tampa, Class Source of Tampa. Hi, Dina. I know you're with us today, so we'll say hi. And I got to say that there were hundreds of students each year in that program. And the number of them that played public school sports, minuscule, like minuscule. And Hillsborough County is the largest homeschool population density per county in the U.S. So of a county that you would think that would be so high, it's so low. And so I think it's a bit far-fetched, but on the other end, I think that idea stretched out over 15 years makes a bit more sense. Like I think that over time, as people become competitive and they want to move to the Armwoods or move to those closer in schools, they already do that in public schools. So why wouldn't they also do that, as home education students? And with the expansion of school choice, you're going to see a lot of parents exercising. I mean, they already are post-COVID exercising their right to home educate or move about the world freely while also educating their children because they can. So I think that it's of some valid concern. So I think we need to brainstorm through the guardrails that it would have.
Well, here's another factor that's
What makes
influenced things is after the home education law passed, and then they implemented charter schools, and I worked to lobby for creation of the Florida Virtual School. Well, those students, Florida Virtual, they don't have a school to participate at because they're spread out all over the state. So then they copied the home education law and said their students could participate at the same places. Then the charter schools did, so now we've got PEP students who are not home education students but have the same privileges. So theoretically, all of these students that are non-traditional students could end up at the same school. So there's got to be some mechanism to relate how many of students are coming in from who are not students at the school, because you don't want to take away the entire team with non-traditional students. So,
Right.
I mean, I see both sides of the argument,
and
we've got to create a fairness issue. So here, before we run out of time.
Yeah, we are getting close.
If a home education or a PEP parent decides that they want their child, maybe it's because it's 2 blocks down the street and it's a convenient school, parents have to take their kids to the program. Maybe it's not that it's the greatest school in the district, but it's the one they choose and they're not zoned in that school. So they need to make up their mind, and they need to go through the school choice process that's set up in each school district. And usually in Palm Beach County, there's a lottery. In other counties, there's a rotation. So you put your school choice in and say, I want to go to school A. And if your number comes up when school A has an opening and they're doing all of the choices that people want to go, maybe everybody else in the district wants to go to school B and C, that group that's in B and C. Well, then you hold yours out until it's time for them to come back around to the opening on A, and maybe you will be able to get your child in. But those things happen. I was told this morning, school choice assignments usually happen in April.
Mm-hmm.
Homeschool parents aren't thinking about that
Yeah.
until the beginning of
Last
the
minute.
sports season.
Right. Yeah.
So you may have missed your window of opportunity. Now, could we
I think
work?
that's a good thing for parents to realize if you do want to participate in those public school sports in that way, that timeline thing that you just mentioned is very important for parents to pay attention to. Because if they wait too long, it's not the window is closed for that choice. Like your kid can still play at a school near you.
Where he's home, where
Right.
there's home, you could move.
Right. Right. But if you're trying to get a specific choice of school, like if it's more than just your kid wants to play, let them play and find a place, and you have a very specific target for that, then you should also be informed about the timeline.
Should plan ahead.
That's right.
I mean, sometimes we're able to reason with the school districts and get somebody in, but don't count on us being able to, um, you
It's not a
know,
guarantee. Yeah.
get your child in. We'll
Hmm.
advocate for you and we'll try to
Yep.
clarify the laws,
Yep.
but we don't have any control over what the school districts
Nope.
do.
Right.
And
And there is room for interpretation for their and the lottery and the implementation of the lottery and different things like that, or having a procedure by which they determine that is actually in the statutes too. So when they do come up with a valid way of doing that, and you're not participating because you missed the timeline or et cetera, there's if exceptions have to be made constantly, or if exceptions have to be made, then you're asking for special treatment. So that I think is a big challenge. All
now,
right, so
and we have one parent who is maybe willing to take this to a lawsuit. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
yeah, I would love to see a debate. I still would. I'm still in that place where I want to get. I would say I want the top five. One of those Jubilee rooms where they do the Jubilee things. Get the top five athletes, one from each. A different sport, not all from football or something, and home education and public school, and let them argue about who should have access and just see what they say. I just want to see what they say, what the parents do, not the informed, not the legislators. I want to see what the populace thinks. I want to get those 5 or 10 people and untrained in debate, just let them argue and see what the thought is.
Hey, you know how to set up a Google Meet?
That's
Find
true.
your people.
Ooh. We might be able to do that actually. That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun. We'll see. I'm not promising anything. time is
That's
tight.
because you're an extrovert and I'm an introvert. I think of it all in my head. I weigh out who's going to say what, how we're going to argue against it. I do all that in my head. Then I come up with a solution. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. So I think what is it? It's not Myers Briggs. It's the Strength Finders or something. I think strategy and ideation and woo were very strong for me. I need an executor sometimes. I need that person I can go, hey, do this. I've had to become my own executor, but still. Well, we are.
I do think it's something that needs some clarification, and it's
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
complicated issue, and
Yeah.
something we might have some discussions with some legislators and see what
Hmm.
they think. But I don't want to sponsor a bill just for this issue.
Right. No.
We
No.
need to find, if we're going to try to change it, and if we can find a solution that makes
Hmm.
sense, then we
Yeah.
need to find a place that we can put it in somebody else's bill.
I think that debate, why I lean toward that is because sometimes when you get people arguing like that, an idea emerges and you're like, oh, that would actually be a really good way of resolving this. Why don't we build around that? And just,
That's the beauty of the legislature. We have Democrats coming at it from one
that's not how it
direction,
works.
Republicans.
That's not how it works. That's just another competitive sport where we cheer for our team. All right, that's enough. Brenda, thank you so much. I love that we have the time of yours to do this, and I love that. I don't know. I think we're a good pairing. I think my skill set for pulling these things together and your history and knowledge and approach and rich background is awesome. And Crystal, you look great on camera, so
I'm just
we're glad
here
to have you with us
today.
too.
We didn't give you a chance to say a thing. Is there any update on the PEP that we should know about?
Oh yeah.
Not yet. I would just say if there's any parents who are frustrated with, reimbursement issues, Step Up is aware of all of that.
All of it.
And we've been in ongoing communication with them. So
Yes.
just that's really all I can say right now. But be encouraged that it's not something that they're ignoring or are unaware of. So
Yes. Yes. That's true, and we have been on calls with them recently and often. So that continues to be the mainstay here. As common as putting on shoes is talking to Step Up for Students. So, well, Brenda, we have other calls to get on to. And so today I think we're going to pull it to a close. I want to tell thank you again to our top sponsors. We really appreciate having you with us. Arete, FPEA, Fisher Precious Metals. And I want to give, at this point, I kind of want to give a shout out to all of the people who are watching the stream. When you share it, it makes that is a massive way of showing our support because it helps us spread our footprint, especially if the topics are stuff that you're interested in or know someone who's interested in. We do post these up on Rumble and YouTube as well for playback afterwards. So if somebody wants to watch these later, they can find them there. Let's see. We always go live at Monday at noon. That's a regular for us. We've only missed from the hurricane a couple of times. Enjoy your home education out there. Make those memories. Do your thing. And if nothing else, then thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next Monday.